Lutheran guys are in this really tough corner because so many families in the last 20, 30 years that are Lutheran weren't taking their Lutheran family households as seriously enough. And I mean, and that's showing because there's a reason why 3 out of 4 confirmed Lutheran high schoolers from the past 10 years aren't Lutheran anymore, because it was in the household that you weren't preparing your child for what's to come. So they could be a confessional Lutheran and eventually start a confessional Lutheran household.
Welcome to Synod Stories, a show about the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, its past, present, and future. Besides learning about the LCMS National Convention, I started this podcast to learn more about what life is like across the Synod. To that end, I have Ray Sexton, who is a member of Trinity Lutheran Church in Springfield, Missouri, a sophomore at Missouri State University, and host of the podcast Lift High the Cross. Ray, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Brian, thank you so much for having me.
Sure. I heard you just really recently on the Church and State podcast, and that your dad is a Lutheran convert. So when did he convert? Was that like before your mom and he met, or was this like a family thing, or how did that go?
Yeah, so roughly around when they were married for about a couple of years. So they both met around actually they knew each other from like 7th grade, 8th grade. They knew each other for a very long time, eventually got married around 19 to 20 years old. And then probably about a year and a half after they were married, they moved in Springfield and they started going church hunting for a little bit. And my mom was from like more of a Pentecostal background. My dad was kind of a more Baptist, not really anything for sure, official. So they kind of went across different places around, and it was actually my uncle, who was a Presbyterian pastor, who recommended them to go to a Lutheran church. and so yeah, and that's where they became Lutheran in Springfield, Missouri. And so they went over there. They were able to go to a catechism class and learn more about Lutheranism and what they're all about. And so the rest was history. And then after a couple of years, I've been a baptized member of the LCMS for about 20 years now.
All right. So, okay, that threw me off, the Presbyterian pastor recommending the LCMS. So do you what do you know about that? That's fascinating.
Yeah. So, so my uncle, he was one of those people that there's a lot of people that were from the millennial standpoint, like about 15 years ago. They all grew up in the 90s and 2000s, and they were really part of the evangelical charismatic worship services and those kind of churches, and a lot of speaking in tongues, going and praising the Lord as hard as they can, delivering yourself to God, that message, and those kind of churches. And so he was one of those that when he went to college, he decided he wanted to become a pastor. So he's naturally a theology nerd like me, so we have that in common. And so he wanted to go through things like the Catholic Church, Reformed churches, and dive into really good liturgical churches, really good rooted theology going back from the church fathers and from the teachings of Christ. And so that's how he became a Reformed and kind of bouncing down different Reformed churches. And so that's how my family started to kind of embrace a little bit more to the Reformed perspective, because he introduced that to definitely my dad's side of the family, because a lot of like Baptist churches, Pentecostal churches, that's what they've always known. And so for a very long time, from generations to generations. And so that's where my dad came. And so yeah, so it's definitely a good relationship. So even though it's easy to go across the Thanksgiving table and start talking theology and start getting very violent about, no, I'm kidding. But no, it's a great blessing to have those kind of family members and talk about theology and have a good understanding of Christ's words, even though we may not agree on a lot of really big, important things, but it's still very good. So I have a lot of family members that are still Baptist and Pentecostal, and we have really good conversations about my Lutheran heritage and then how my parents came to that, because they came from both sides. They really didn't know where to go. They knew going to church was important, but then eventually they realized about what this Lutheranism is and what it's so special about. It's not just some different hybrid Catholic church. It's not just some Reformed church that's trying to be un-Catholic as possible. It is something way more than that. So I've been very blessed to be a part of a congregation in the LCMS that's very conservative, very liturgical in their worship. There's a lot of Lutheran churches in Springfield, but I'd say in Trinity Lutheran, we are the most conservative when it comes to liturgical worship. And so that's all I've known. And so as I've gotten older, I started learning more about different church groups, learning the differences and what we have in common and Protestantism. And so that's been a great ride. So I'm always jealous of a lot of people that say that they were Baptist for a long time or Roman Catholic for 40 years and how they found the LCMS. And I'm like, ah, man, that's awesome, man. I'm jealous of that story. That's way better than mine. But then they talk to me and they say, well, Ray, you're 20 years old and you've been a Lutheran for 20 years and in the middle of Missouri, which is, I mean, even though we're called the Missouri Synod, it's not really the Lutheran Missouri anymore. And so how special that is, you came from these backgrounds and became Lutheran for 20 years. And so that's been a great blessing too, as I think about it.
That's awesome. So real quick, is your uncle a PCA minister or PCUSA, or do you know which one?
He was from the PCA.
Okay.
And it's kind of hard to tell because through those kind of churches and pastors, they can it's a little bit easier for them to go to different churches. I think he started preaching at a more Reformed Baptist church at one point, and then it is kind of hard to tell. And then also he identifies as just Reformed right now, and so that's all their family members identify. So I do believe they were part of the PCA for a while, though.
That makes more sense that they would be to go to the Reformed side, because my wife's cousin is a PCUSA minister, and that was almost like ELCA basically. I mean, we used to go to some services there and just be like, wow, this is different.
Yeah, it's bad. I've never been to an ELCA church before, but I hear horror stories about those churches over there, and also the PCA UA, and how a lot of corruption is over there, from not just from the worship styles, but also just the theology and doctrine itself. It's pretty bad over there.
Yeah. So do you have siblings?
Yeah, I only have six.
Six. Nice.
Yeah,
Very nice.
Yeah, so I have two sisters and four brothers. I was the middle child for a long time, so there was only three of us for a while. So I was stuck with two sisters. No, I'm kidding. I was blessed. But after that, I had four brothers. So our family has grown so much for the time, and thankfully they still live in Missouri. That's where I've always grown up, in Springfield, Republic, all around those areas, from Nixa, Missouri, around that area, Missouri, right by the Boot. And I go to college at Missouri State, and so I've been really blessed to have a situation where I can work in Springfield, go to school in Springfield, and then go back home in Republic for the holidays. I just spent 2.5 weeks back at my family's house, and thankfully they're still welcoming me back to the house. And so, that's a big blessing. And just going back home and living in Missouri State, and just kind of seeing a lot of the dynamics and different church styles in Missouri State, a lot of Baptists, a lot of Pentecostals, a lot of Reformed. I mean, there's a Presbyterian church, a Catholic church, and student centers everywhere of different church backgrounds. And so I live in a Lutheran student center, so that's pretty nice. So
Nice.
the very few Lutherans that are in Missouri State, I've been able to talk with them and have good times with them. So yeah, so that's what I do in Missouri. I'm very blessed. I am always able to go over there and study the Word, go and talk to people and have great conversations at Missouri State, and while being really close to my family. So I've always figured it's so nice that I don't have to be 8 or 10 hours away from home from college. So that's always been a blessing to me.
Very nice. So when you were growing up, did you go to like Higher Things or the National Youth Gathering? I'm just curious.
Yeah, don't get me started on Higher Things. That's for an entire whole podcast. We'll be here for 2 hours. But so I went to the youth gathering for the first time, I think 4 years ago. That was my first time going over there. And yeah, that was really good. I really enjoyed the youth gathering. It's very nice. But a couple years ago, I did hear about Higher Things, and I actually didn't hear about it until 3 years ago. And so I got to try that out. Our church has always gone to youth gathering every 4 years. That's when it comes out. So I wasn't really too sure about Higher Things, and it just blew my mind how amazing it is over there, how liturgical everything is. You do a divine service in the beginning of the conference. You get to do one at the end, and very, very good people are a part of that. I mean, genuinely, very, very confessional Lutherans are a part of it, and it's a real blessing to see how they work really hard to show Lutheranism to the youth. It's very nice. I know some people that are a part of it, part of the board. I know actually our vicar a couple years ago was Pastor Hines. He was our vicar for a couple years, so I've gotten to know him and his family for a little bit. His father also is a part of the board as well. I know Pastor Goodman, who's also a big leader in the Higher Things group, and he's been a very blessing to me as well, getting to know him, seeing how he leads the higher things. So that's a very good thing that I've grown in the last couple of years. It's definitely helped me grow my Lutheran faith, learning more about Lutheranism from those conferences. So I also went to the adult. It was like the young adult conference for higher things. It was last year. I don't think they're doing one this year, but I went to go to that, and there was like 20, 30 kids there. And so that was very, very interesting too.
That's cool. I didn't know that they had an adult or a young adult one. My daughter went to there was one up in Portland a couple like last year or something. So she went to that one. But yeah, that's nice to hear.
Yeah.
So I definitely don't like or don't want to go the negative route, but tell me about the youth gathering stuff that, there's always controversy around the youth gathering. Did you feel like it was not appropriate in any way, shape, or form, or what were your feelings in those regards?
Well, when you brought up the youth gathering, I was instantly trying to figure out if you're a youth gathering supporter or what are you trying to do? You're trying to put me on your podcast, but no, just kidding. Yeah, so definitely when I went to the youth gathering, I'd say since it was 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I definitely wasn't as aware as my Lutheran faith as I am now. So going there, I thought it was really cool. And definitely 4 years ago, I was more focused on having fun, hanging out and joking around with my buddies more than learning about Christ, learning more about Lutheranism. And so I didn't really realize how much I was missing out until I went to higher things. And that really helped me see the differences and definitely the pros and cons between two. And then, going into this, there's already going to be a lot of controversy because there's so much of the LCMS that it really enjoys the youth gathering because a lot because of nostalgic reasons, because this has been going for a long time. And so a lot of the adults and parents at our church, they really want their kids to go there just because they went there when they were kids. And so that's their biggest reasoning. And being able to experience both has kind of showed me why I prefer higher things way more than the youth gathering. Because, not just a lot, every now and then you'll see a session over there that, maybe not be the best over there. And definitely I see more of the youth gathering is focusing a lot more on the fun perspective, which isn't necessarily always a bad thing. It's good to bring kids and not just read their Bible all week. It's good to have fun, but definitely when I was there, I felt like it was more focused on being more like a Baptist or a Pentecostal youth gathering. And definitely there were some controversial videos that were coming out on things like how kids were worshiping over there on services. I definitely saw a lot of that when I was there on the first time I went to the youth gathering. And even at the time I was like, that's interesting how a lot of those kids were how they were reaching to Christ and things like that. It felt very charismatic. And definitely since that's something I wasn't used to, like just thinking Lutheran. Naturally, when I think of Lutheran, I think of confessional Lutheranism. And like I said, I've been so spoiled being in such a conservative confessional Lutheran church all my life in America. So, and so I definitely have some issues on the youth gathering. I'm glad you brought that up because every time I mention it back at church, it's definitely a iffy topic because a lot of these parents and different people that are in support of going to the youth gathering rather than higher things. It can get really tough, but it's a big discussion because there's a lot more pros I think that comes with higher things because for one thing, higher things is a lot more cheaper. There's not going to be a lot of churches that are going to afford the youth gathering as much, especially if there's a lot of kids going. And I think higher things definitely has a lot more of the confessionalism rooted into the church. So, we'll probably get into this with a couple of your questions, but I think a lot of problems with kids that are my age and a few years younger that are Lutheran, big reasons why they leave the Lutheran church is because they see a lot of the different activities that other churches provide, a lot of different things that look exciting and modern and more hip. And so they look at that and they realize, I want to try these different things. And so I am glad that the youth gathering is trying to do some of those things, but definitely it's come to the point where it's, okay, if you're wanting to worship like this, go to a Pentecostal conference, not a Lutheran conference. And so that's definitely things that I've definitely have seen from the youth gatherings. I don't want to be too negative about the youth gathering because I think there's still a lot of good people that are a part of it that I'm aware of. I think they do a good job of it. I do think we could definitely keep shoving more confessionalism down our kids' throats because they need it. We need it so much. I mean, Martin Luther was telling in the Large Catechism that your kids shouldn't be able to get out of bed or eat unless if they cite the Old Testament or Old Testament commandments or cite different verses for the sacraments. And so, and I mean, we should bring more of that. You don't have to be that aggressive, but I think having more of that and encouraging more of that is going to help build more healthy Lutheran kids. Because if we're not nursing our youth as much as we can and at the best of our abilities, I mean, that's why we're getting a lot of different articles that are saying like 3 out of 4 new confirmed Lutherans out of high school are leaving the church, or you're seeing that the 1.8 million LCMS members, half of them are denying a lot of doctrinal beliefs. And I mean, it's there is some complications to that. I mean, it's not black and white, but I mean, in the end, a big reason for that, especially from my generation, it's because we're not being disciplined enough in our Lutheran faith. And so that's a lot of things I see. I mean, I'm also a big picture guy. So when people send their kids over to the youth gathering and they're thinking, okay, they're Lutheran, they're having fun, they get to experience, maybe they'll meet the love of their life. And so I'm not really thinking about that. I'm also not a parent. So, I mean, I'm a stuck up 20-year-old that's in college and I think I know everything, which I don't. So, yeah. And so, you know, it's you take it with a grain of salt, but that's definitely things that I think not just youth gathering can improve on, but different churches in the LCMS could.
This is exactly why I wanted to talk to you, because you have a younger person's perspective on, us old guys. We critique things in a specific way, and we don't often or don't actually know what you guys are thinking. And so this is going to come up in a bunch of other questions too, is that I want to hear your perspective on, what the youth are getting out of things and what you guys are seeing and where things are missing. So, yeah. I think I heard that you are thinking, or you're planning on going to seminary or thinking about it. Have you visited them, either of them? I know they have some. I know Fort Wayne has like a program to like you can go there for a couple weeks and experience things. Does St. Louis have something like that? And have you researched those things?
I haven't gone to an official get together or I guess a visitation over there in St. Louis yet, but I've been there at least a dozen times because there's a lot of high school conferences they do in the summer. There's one called Wakatio, and I've been there for 3 or 4 years. And I mean, that's a conference that's built specifically for young adults that are considering becoming ministers. And so I've been over there, and so I've been able to check out the campus over there, which is beautiful and gorgeous. The buildings are spectacular. I haven't been to Fort Wayne yet, and so that's definitely something I've thought about for a long time. I was actually talking to a longtime member of our church who's married to they just got married to a student at Fort Wayne, and I was talking to him to make some connections so I can go over there and visit sometime. That's something I think I'm possibly planning to do this summer. I'm hoping, or I hope so, because I'm really busy, but we'll see. But I want to check over there at Fort Wayne because it seems really cool. I've met so many very good people that have come out from that church. I know Dr. Adam Kuntz and Pastor Brian Wolfmueller. They both went over there. Tyrell Bramwell, who's been on my podcast for a couple of times, they've all went there and became pastors over there. And I just hear so many good things about Fort Wayne. A lot of good things about St. Louis too. So I've wanted to visit over there for a while. That's why I kind of say that I'm really undecided where to go to, because I do want to pursue ministry after college. That's why I haven't really thought about it too much, because it's still a couple more years to go before I can think about it, and I haven't even been to Fort Wayne yet. So, but yeah, it's definitely been on my radar for a while. It's been something that for the past 5 years I've been like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Should I be a pastor? No, that's a terrible idea. You'd be a terrible pastor. And so, but yeah, in the last couple of years, that's something that I have thought about a lot. So very exciting, very nerve-wracking at the same time.
So what has been your biggest influence in terms of getting interested in theology?
Oh, man. Well, for starters, I'd say my dad. Definitely. I'd say, and if you ever talk to him, he'll be like, no. I mean, he's not a theology guy. He's not a pastor or anything. But I mean, really hearing my dad's story and how he led my mom to get out of their comfort zone and experience Lutheranism and go over there and check out things like going to an altar and tasting Christ's body and blood, or remembering your baptism, and those are very important things that Christ has established. And seeing that and having the courage to try something new and experiencing it and learning about it. And since he's been a Lutheran, I guess since I'm 20, he's been a Lutheran for 21, 22 years. And so him leading a household and teaching us the foundations of being a Christian, a liturgical Christian, that's been such a blessing. I've been very blessed of having such a very good household that's, came from very different fruity Christian backgrounds, and have become this very liturgical family. And so that's something that's always inspired me. I haven't always wanted to be a pastor, but I've always been at least somewhat interested about learning more about God's word. It's definitely something that I've always wanted to learn more about, especially in 2020, just something that really inspired me to keep going. And so I'd say from like the more pastoral perspective or online perspective, I've definitely have always been a huge fan of Pastor Brian Wolfmueller. All of his stuff is phenomenal. I actually, I don't think I read his book How American Christianity Has Failed until 3 or 4 years ago, and I knew about him for a really long time, and that just gave me an even more unbelievable amount of how thankful I am that he's doing online content and writing books, and so he's great as well. Tyrell Bramwell, Pastor Bramwell, he's been a figure I've really looked up to in the past few years, and seeing the stuff that he is doing in Ferndale, California, being able to fight all the demons that are in California. And also, I mean, a big reason why I wanted to start a podcast is being able to put Lutherans in more uncomfortable spots, being able to preach the gospel, because I'd say our biggest pro is being able to get different Christians to come to Lutheranism and see that. But I'd say one of our weakest things in the church is being able to just spread the gospel to non-believers, or being able to fight earthly demons. And Bramwell is a perfect example of that, and that's why I've had him on a couple of times, because he's doing a great service to the Lutheran Church. I mean, there's so many LCMS churches that are starting to gradually fall into sin and temptation and lots of works of the devil, and Pastor Bramwell for the past few years has been able to make a very healthy running conservative LCMS church in Ferndale, California, just a few hours away from LA, which is the cornerstone of Satan, in my opinion. And so, and that's, and so I've been able to see a lot of these different people, especially through X, because there's a strong X community. You know this, and of Lutheran people. And so I've been able to talk to people like Brian Wolfmueller, Dr. Adam Kuntz, Pastor Fisk, and Dr. Jordan Cooper. All those guys have been great. And so that's definitely inspired me to not only want to go into ministry someday, but also just kind of get into the battlefields of podcasting and someday preaching the gospel on a pulpit. That's definitely something that that's the thing about Lutherans. We don't have 100,000 different podcasts or different pastors that are doing TikToks and stuff like that. I mean, the Catholics are starting, done a great job of that. Evangelical Christians do a better job. Reformed definitely do a better job than Lutherans. But I mean, Lutherans, we have a dozen of very, very solid guys on the internet that's just going at it. I mean, Cooper and Wolfmueller and Bramwell, those guys are studs. And so that's something I really want to aspire to be. I mean, I'm probably never going to be as good as those guys. Those guys are incredible. Those guys are saints. But that's definitely something that people I've definitely looked up to, that have definitely helped me see the importance of the Lutheran Church and podcasting.
Cool. So you are very insightful, because you mentioned that you've seen that Lutherans are good at bringing existing Christians over, but we're kind of weak in terms of like the straight non-believer. We have a lot more difficulty with that. And that actually, I was listening to a podcast with Pastor Heath Curtis. He's like I think he's the district president of the Central Illinois district now, or Southern, either Central or Southern. And so he was talking about, they commissioned a study when he was the stewardship leader at district, or at the national level. And he said that in that, a demographer said, our strength is taking people who are Christians and giving them a solid, a better understanding of where they're erring and bringing them over. And he actually said And the demographer, he's a secular guy, but a demographer was like, he suggested that we should actually lean into our strength because we're, like focus, even though, we do need to get better at the other because you don't want to have, a weakness so bad that it's just like, you're just blind to it. But like we should lean into the aspect of, taking it, I don't want to say sheep stealing because I think we're taking people who are nominally Christian. They kind of have a basic background, but they don't really understand how important all doctrine is and how, even going to church, how important that is. And so bringing them over. But like I say, you diagnose that very well without even having to have someone give you, like commission a study. So that's awesome.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
So you mentioned your family as your faith formed by your family as a big part of you. So besides going to, besides Sunday service and stuff, does your family have any family practices that you guys do together?
Yeah, we definitely when I was younger, we would look through the small catechism all the time. That's, something that I would do a lot. And definitely, obviously there's some parts of my life where I could have done a better job of that. I mean, nobody's perfect, but that's definitely something that I've always regularly look at. That's something that's definitely helped me strengthen my Lutheran faith a lot. There's so much good stuff in the small catechism. Learning about the Ten Commandments and the creeds and the Lord's prayers, the petitions, very, very core Christian values and doctrine that every Christian should believe. That's one thing that I try to make sure it comes across when I'm talking to people about you should look into Luther catechism. Naturally people think at the catechism, like, oh, Luther? I'm like, no. These are things that Luther wrote that every Christian should believe. Everything. That's a lot of what my parents would really try to do in the household is to have teachings that it's not just Luther. Don't look at it as Lutheran values, Lutheran beliefs. Think of it as Christian beliefs. That's the important thing to come across. We're not trying to be un-Catholic as possible, like John Calvin or Zwingli. This is like the true Catholic teachings of Jesus Christ, and we should uphold them. The law and gospel, those are the things that would always go through our households all the time. Another really important thing, this is pretty simple. A lot of good Christians do this, but having devotions at night. Either it's sometimes we'll shake it up. We'll do right after dinner, so everyone's done with their meal, and then we'll have a devotion, or we'll after we clean, or if we're doing a couple of things around the house and before bed, that's when we'll do devotion. That's what I've always enjoyed doing in my family, because something that my dad has always loved doing is not just going through scripture by detail, but going through passages and then just talking about it. Just talking out loud, giving me a chance, my siblings a chance to give in their own thoughts about scripture, what it means, and just kind of helping us build confidence and courage of just talking about learning more about the Bible on our own. And that's something that I've definitely been blessed over time of experiencing, because of just how important it is just to read your Bible and being able to understand it, think about it, about what it actually means. And so that's something that's also we've done all the time. And so I've been very blessed of being in a household that's going through not just the Bible, but also the catechism. That's also something that a lot of Lutheran households forget to do. The Book of Concord, hello, or the large or small catechism. So, just very important tools that Luther made for a reason. And so you can have different devotions. The Lutheran Church has lots of cool devotion books that you can try, but in my opinion, the Augsburg Confession, the Small Catechism, and the Bible are the three biggest things that you should be constantly showing your kids. And that's something I've always been thankful to do in our households that my dad has always taught me.
Very cool. Very cool. So I have a couple questions about your church itself. So how big is your congregation?
Trinity Lutheran Church, man, I was ushering the other day, and we have 668 members, I think. For a while it was 666. That was bad, but but we have that many members. I think probably since we do 2 divine services, one at 8 o'clock, one at 10 o'clock every Sunday, and I'd say active members that come every Sunday is around, I'd say 300 to 350.
Okay. Okay, so and this is always the question because we used to have it when my church used to have two services, and we moved back to one because we got a little bit smaller. But how connected do those two services feel, or like because for me, in my experience, it was like they almost were different. At times felt like different congregations because they very rarely did people cross over. How does that feel in your congregation?
It's funny you mentioned that because it was just a few years ago I just realized of how distant I was to the other side of my church family. I mean, I'll usually recognize everyone at my church, but you definitely have your early service people, your late service people, and for a while my family would always go to late service, but then for a while we would go to early service, and I just remember how when I would go there and then after church we'd talk for a little bit and I realized I don't really engage with a lot of these people at all. I mean, besides maybe like at the annual potluck or places like that, I mean, almost never. So yeah, yeah, so definitely there's a lot of churches that do that, and
Yeah.
definitely since, and especially how big my church is, and so I mean there's people that I've known since I've been a baby over there, and so always different people I'm meeting. A lot of, and also our church has been growing in the last like year and a half. We've had a lot of younger families that are coming, so yeah, that is a funny tandem that I always realize a lot of people suffer with. Which I mean, it's a good thing. Your church is so big. There's some people you don't even know, but I mean, definitely you should meet all your people at church.
Yeah. So that's always and this is a question I pose to pastors all the time is like, what is the right size for a church? Like, and it varies all the time. I think churches that get up to like the 600 mark or so, or get past the 300. It like, I always wonder is like, should they then form another congregation? I mean, should you be branching out in that way? And I don't know the right answer to that, but it always comes to mind when it's because like like we're just talking about, there's when it's so big you lose touch with the other half of the congregation, as it is.
I completely agree with you. I think we should have started a new church a long time ago. So I mean, and then obviously there's a lot of things that you need to consider when rebuilding a church, especially. I mean, I'm not a pastor or or a head leader at our church, so I don't really know the big details in that. I don't want to act like that I know everything, but I do say that is something to consider, especially how God makes it clear that there is a certain amount of people you should be teaching. I mean, it can get too big. I mean, if you look at really example for all the big evangelical pastors that are big celebrities. I mean, they're worshiping all these people. I mean, their doctrine is all heresy, yes, but even if it wasn't, a one individual shouldn't be preaching to all these people. I mean, you need to have someone is able to individually go and talk to people. I mean, that's why we have things like confession. I mean, very important to know your people individually, encouraging them to come to you and talk it out, being able to discuss issues with life, secret sins, and you're able to combat those things. I mean, that's the biggest thing that comes in my mind when I look at my church. There's 700 people there, and I mean, I'm pretty confident that there's a lot of people that don't use confession, but if in that situation, if 700 people were using confession, I mean, that would be an issue because we only have one active pastor right there. We do have a vicar right now. We've had vicars for the past 4 years, but for a long time, we would just have one pastor, one sole pastor, and he's done a phenomenal job. I love him to death. But I do think it does come to a point where you should consider about making new churches so you're able to spread out a little bit more, because it is very important to have people be individual, being able to talk about separate things that you can't normally do in crowds, because you could do big devotions with everyone. Obviously, when you do your sermon, everyone's able to hear you, but when it comes to the individual tasks that pastors are called to do, it is definitely time to consider with things like that. You should have someone, or possibly have an associate pastor that's able to do more of those things individually. Having someone like him to do more things like confession and encourage that's also a good thing, and that can also help take a load off the head pastor, so he's able to do more of that as well. And so, yeah, that's something that I've thought about a long time. I am starting to become more of wanting to be just a head pastor. But yeah, I don't know. But definitely talking to different people. But yeah, that's something that I've thought about a while too. I would encourage that more to churches that are in those situations. Not a lot of Lutheran churches are in the situation my church is. It's one of the best problems to have. Too many people at church, but yeah, it is an issue that's worth considering when you're in those spots at a church.
Yeah. So I imagine like you're talking about like pastoral care just at that with that number of people is got to be hard. My pastor was when I was discussing this with him, I think he had like he was in Michigan, so they're big churches. There's like 800, and it became like if you knew the pastor or if he knew your name, you became a celebrity. It was and that was like he did not like that aspect at all. He's like, how can you, if you don't, like, how can you give proper pastoral care if you're, like, if it feels like there's a divide in who knows the pastor and who doesn't kind of thing. It's yeah. So does your congregation do anything like within your circuit? Like, do you have inter-circuit things like Reformation Day services or anything along those lines?
No, a lot of those things we do just individually as a church. We have two other two local churches in Springfield that are also a confessional Lutheran. I would say we're connected pretty well. We're active and we'll go to events, but not necessarily things like that. We just do those things like Reformation Sunday or Christmas service. So those things we just really do as a church. Everyone else kind of does their own thing. And I think a big reason for that is because I'd say there is a lot of slightly different confessions that we do uphold. I mean, the other two churches are not nearly as liturgical as our church. They have more modern style services, and I think one church also only does communion every other week. And I mean those things aren't valid enough to shun our church away. I'd say it's also a community thing, because we are very active and doing things inside of our church, and so we're just not really thinking necessarily all the time about going to different churches and talking. I go to the Lutheran student center that's at Missouri State. That's where I live right now, and I know a couple of people that go to some of those different churches, and so I've been able to talk and learn a little bit more about different Lutherans that are good, loyal and faithful Lutherans, but they come from different, more modern services and doing things like communion every other week. And so that's definitely something that's kind of opened my eyes a little bit more about different Lutherans and different practices. And so I wouldn't necessarily say we're purposely trying to get away from our circuit, but that's definitely something that I guess we could do a better job. We don't really think about it that much.
It's not actually, I don't know that it's that normal, especially when in better times, that we haven't really thought about the circuit as a unit. It's more, there's a circuit visitor, but like the congregations within the circuit don't often, like maybe once in a while they have a special service or something together, but usually they are pretty much insular, or not insular, but like they're really not thinking about what's going on outside of their own congregation. They're busy enough with their own. I think on the West Coast where I am, I'm trying to promote like the gathering together of churches within a circuit, because we're like islands unto ourselves, and if we're under some like there's an element of being under siege, and you need as many friends as you can get, even and so we shouldn't think of them as other churches. It's like we're all one body of Christ kind of thing. So yeah. Another question: how does your church do confirmation?
Yeah, so our church does another spicy topic.
Oh, okay. All right.
But what I did and what we're still doing right now is that we do midweek teachings for confirmation starting from 5th grade, and that goes all the way up to 8th grade. And once 8th grade is you're finished with 8th grade, that's when you get into high school, and that's when you become confirmed. And so you go through different the grades go on until from like 7th to 8th grade. That's when we really go serious, hardcore into the small catechism. And so I remember at the time at 7th grade, you really go into the small catechism. You're going through the petitions, you're going through the creeds, you're going through different verses from the sacraments and how we believe into it and confessing it. And 8th grade is it was from our head pastor, and he would talk a lot of not just about the small catechism, but also a lot of things to consider in the outside world. I mean, how Lutherans should see the secular world, how we should see from different churches, how we should go into our adult lives, and how we can see all this sin and temptation and evil things in the world, and how we can look at it in the perspective of a Lutheran, and how we can use the church and Christ's gifts within the church and use it to fight against it. And I remember those sessions really well. I'm very thankful for the stuff that he did when I was confirmed. And so I definitely admit, when I was in 8th grade, I wasn't taking my faith or my Christian faith, but my Lutheran faith very seriously, not really having a huge grasp. I think I was struggled a little bit of understanding some parts of it. And so that's how we usually do it. And so and that's how we still bring people up. We bring the new confirmed kids to this church service, and they answer a bunch of questions, just basic things like what we believe in different denominations, what we believe in, and the confessions of the Lutheran Church, and say, do you believe that this sacrament can do these things, very things that most people do for getting confirmation going. And so that's what we have always done. Probably not what we've always done at the church, at our church, because our church has been around for over 150 years. And so, but that's something that we've always done for a really long time. I say that's a spicy topic because I've always liked how Lutherans have done it for such a very long time, which, I mean, even a 6-year-old could take the communion if he was capable of doing, which is by the judgment of the pastor. I mean, looking through different passages from what St. Paul teaches in 1 Corinthians about casting judgment upon yourself. I mean, there's 7-year-olds that are capable of taking the sacrament, and there's 70-year-olds that aren't able to take it because they're not ready yet. And so, I mean, but that's why we have closed communion. That's why we use it not just to hoard Christ's gift for ourselves, but to protect people so they're not casting judgment upon themselves or harming themselves when they're taking it. And naturally, when Lutherans think about that, and we're like, yeah, that's why we don't let Baptists come and take it, but we definitely want them to come to church and learn and teach them, and hopefully, possibly someday, they could take it one day and become Lutheran. Well, why don't we do that for the 7-year-olds that have been Lutherans forever, that were baptized? I mean, we're the church, for goodness sake, that teach that born childs are Christians. They don't have to wait 10 years to be baptized and make this whole confession. We're all sinners, and we're all born again through baptism as soon as we get rebirthed by Christ and that blessing. And so why not consider this? And so that's definitely something that I've always thought about. I always thought that was the right way of doing it, waiting till 8th grade and then high school. I mean, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But learning more into going into more into theology, and definitely talking to different friends of mine that have become pastors and how they look at things, that's definitely something that made me change my mind a bit. I mean, I don't hate my church for it. I love my church to death, but I mean, yeah, that's something that I've really thought about for a lot too. I mean, there's a lot of things that topics and issues that pastors shouldn't die on a hill on, but there is certainly some things that they should die on a hill on. Or yeah, and I think those are one of the things too. I mean, obviously, close communion is a big one, but I think it's important because if you have young children that are capable of taking the sacrament and desperately need it, you shouldn't keep that gift away from them.
That's a really good way to put it. It'll be interesting when you get out into a parish, if you're so called. I've had this discussion many times with my pastor and other pastors, and it's interesting. The hesitation is often, there's you who was steeped in this, and your parents are well catechized and are catechizing you well at home, and then there's the parents that yeah, they're come once a month maybe or something, and then they're then you get this split where you're ready at 7, the other 7-year-old is not even remotely ready, and then they get all offended when your child is going and they're not, and they're like, well, it's preferential treatment. What is not? It's like they taught their child and you have slacked off in that regard. And so it's a tough conversation that pastors have. I know that's why that's actually there's a number of them that have that issue.
Definitely. I think you nailed it right on the head right there. I'd say a huge reason why I see some pastors that don't even look at that topic is because everyone agrees with what they have right now. So just leave it at that. And so, but I think a big issue is when you have something like that just for the sake of either tradition or, I mean, it's everything's on schedule. Everyone gets confirmed at 8th grade and just leave it at that. But I mean, I think it also leads to the problem of, I mean, if that's what your church has been doing a long time and it becomes more of just a routine rather than this huge ceremony. I mean, I know so many 8th graders that were in my group that aren't Lutheran anymore, or at least aren't taking their Lutheran faith very seriously, or probably a lot of them that wasn't ready to take it. I mean, there's probably some instance where I should have rethought it. I mean, there's a lot of times where I was kind of just saying yes to everything and and started taking it, but probably there should have been a talk that I should have went to my pastor about it, because I mean, those things happen. I mean, not just from the 8-year-old perspective. I mean, that's the things that we worry about, but I mean, that happens in every aspect, a different age. I mean, it happens all the time. And so there's issues on wherever you do it. If you start when you're 3 years old, or if you start when you're 15 years old, I mean, there's always going to be problems, but that's why the core of it should always be about the pastor making that decision, thinking if this person is ready. And so, and then like you said, there's always going to be, and someone's always going to have an issue with something. I mean, it's like if you're running a business or you're running your job. I mean, your boss or your employee or a client is always going to have a problem with you. I mean that goes without saying, but you can't really think about it that way, because I mean, this is God's word we're talking about. You have to make sure everything is according to His will. And if someone's not ready, then you have to make that tough talk. If someone is ready, then you should be overjoyed. And so, I mean, that's a lot of tough situations that pastors have to take. I mean, that's why some pastors just want to push it aside and think it's not a huge deal, or that's some pastors are bold enough to make those decisions. I mean, and sadly, that's I wouldn't have a statistic to tell you, but I would be pretty confident in telling you that that's probably the majority of what a lot of LCMS churches practice. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more LCMS churches that are way more traditional than Trinity is, and they do stuff like that, which is awesome. But I mean, I would say there's a lot of churches that have kind of fallen into the category of like tiny little things that isn't a huge deal, but if you look at it from the perspective of what Scripture teaches or what makes a healthy church, you see that, and you're going to get the results of kids that need this gift and they're not able to receive it, or you're going to have 8-year-olds or 9-year-olds that are just saying yes to everything. And if everything's just a routine rather than kind of inspecting everything, making sure everything's good, then you're going to have different kids those age that are just taking it, not understanding what they're getting to, or eventually say, this is silly. Why am I doing this? Nobody else is taking it seriously, so why should I? So I should go. So yeah, always problems from everywhere. But I mean, that's why it always is important to have your elders, the parents, adults, and pastor always nursing your young Christian kids and being able to help them understand these things, because they are very important.
I think you bring up a good point, or having me think about like those kind of traditions that we kind of just are on autopilot on. We should be teaching through all those things, and maybe when we teach through them, we might come to a different conclusion. Like if we taught through the idea that of decoupling First Communion from confirmation, like we might come to a better understanding and a better mechanism or process by where people are admitted earlier, and it makes it's much more faithful. And any other our traditions, even like the order of service and stuff like that, I've always tried to focus with people who are like hesitant about the DS3 or 1 or whatever. I try to teach them through it. I was the youth group not leader, I guess, or, on Sunday morning for the last 5-6 years. And we used to go through the order of service all the time. And I would say, this is why we do this. This is what it's proclaiming and all those kind of things. So anything that we have as a tradition, it still needs to be taught through, or else it just gets lost. And like you said, people just kind of just go, yes, yes, yes. They're on autopilot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in your church, have people encouraged you to pursue the ministry?
Too many. Naturally you're going to have your older ladies that are going to say, hey, you should be a pastor. And I got too much of that all my life. And and I'm asking them, do you see me talk? Are you serious? And so, and that's probably was 7-ish years away when I didn't even consider ministry. And so, yeah, I've definitely had a lot of really good people that's been able to help me inspire. If you want an example of how the Holy Spirit works in your life and they help guide you to the right direction, it's looking at the people that God put into my life, and when, despite me not having a clue of what I want to do, and for a good chunk of my life thinking that there's no way I would do something like ministry, I have these people that gave me all this feedback and encouragement, and just seeing simple things like me doing devotions at our youth camp, or talking at Sunday school, or just having a conversation at church afterwards, and they say, have you ever considered ministry? It seems like these are things that you would be really good at. And I definitely have to give a shout out to my buddy Pastor Samuel Eisenberg, who was our vicar 4 years ago, our first ever vicar for a very long time at our church. And so I also had the privilege of having him on my podcast a few months back, but he is the definition of just being a selfless, encouraging person. Being overjoyed at being at church, wanting to preach the gospel of, vicars at our church, they preach every other Sunday, and that's something normally vicars don't do. But he didn't care. He loved spreading the gospel, and not just from people, just when he was on the pulpit or just giving people communion. It was also, he would do such an amazing job talking to people individually. There's 400 active members at our church. He would talk to everyone. He would know everyone's name. Just as a vicar, he would say everyone's name every time people would come up to communion. And I was like, who is this guy? This guy's nuts. And then at the time, I was probably the most quiet, uninterested at church teenager as you can get 5 or 6 years ago. And he came up to me and was just he was caring and thoughtful, very encouraging to me, someone that I really looked up to when he was at church. He's been one of the best blessings God has ever given to me. And I went to, his church is in Carrollton, which is 3 hours away. I drove there yesterday, 3 hours away, to go see his second son's baptism. And that's how much he means to me. And so that is definitely someone that has really helped inspire me of wanting to pursue ministry. Someone like him, seeing his background and what he went through and why he wanted to become a pastor, and how he's still caring, not just at church, but also just talking to you as a person. That's so many pastors I see that talk about the gospel and the law when they're at church or on their pulpit. They love giving the sacraments. They love preaching the word. But then when it comes to being just individual, that's what a lot of pastors struggle, because a lot of them are quiet, shy theology nerds that would never talk to anyone besides their wife. But he's the complete opposite of that. And so that's someone that I've definitely looked up to for a long time.
That's very cool. So let's kind of switch towards the social media landscape. So what got you into podcasting?
That's a good question. I would say around, this probably goes a long ways from 2020, when I started to really go really deep into my life and learning more about theology. It was very easy to look into theology at the time, because what else were you going to do than watch YouTube videos at home? I was a freshman at high school. What was I supposed to do? And so I would start looking at a lot of different videos and learning more about not only my church, but different churches out there. And I thought it was really cool to see different people from different backgrounds that were courageous enough to go preach the gospel to people that are so lost in their faith and people that are so overwhelmed by the secular world. And seeing that was very inspiring, something that I wanted to be a part of, something that kind of made me think a little bit more about maybe not just be part of ministry, but wanting me to be more active in the church, especially at the time where we couldn't even go to church and take the sacraments at the time. And so after a while, that's something that got me more into theology. And then I'd say I'm not going to get the years right, like 2023, 2 Decembers ago, I decided I want to be able to contribute to the Lutheran faith more. And a big hole that I've noticed in such a long time is that the average Lutheran, they'll somewhat know who Brian Wolfmueller is, and then nothing really else. I mean, it doesn't help that. I'm not saying this in a negative way, but because there's more Lutherans are more older folk in our synod. I mean, they're not really active on social media besides Facebook, so they're not really always digging into different theology, different YouTube channels, and so that's something I noticed. And then especially since in the last 2 years, and now there is so many people in my generation that are longing to have go to a way better church that's more than just speaking tongues. They want liturgy. They want actual core beliefs that's inside of scripture, pastors that can actually interpret God's word and not just say whatever comes up to their head at that moment when they're preaching for 7 minutes every Sunday. And that's something that I've noticed. And so, and which is such a good thing, because now my generation is double the amount of the church attendance has doubled the amount of the last few generations, which is fantastic. But now, because nowadays it's so easy to kind of go into the rabbit hole of YouTube or Spotify and look at these different churches that are advertising what they believe, it's such a battlefield of my church is better, no, my church is better. And then I've also noticed how, especially in the last 5 years, Catholics, Reformed, and evangelical Christians have dominated the Christian atmosphere on especially YouTube, but just Christian pop culture in of itself. And so, if you think about the word Christian at the Lutheran, or Christian on the internet, you naturally think of guys like George Janko, Cliff Connectley, or Father Schmidt. Those are like some of the big figures you'll naturally think of, influencers on the internet. And there's not really much of the Lutherans. I'd say we're possibly dead last in just internet culture, which has a lot to do with a lot of generations of Lutherans that are not wanting to tussle with other Lutherans or get in trouble with different denominations. We want to be we don't want to get our inner Luther and piss people off. We want to be kind and caring, and you're either with us or out. That's cool. We'll be brothers and sisters in Christ with you anyway. And so looking at my generation and how hungry they are of wanting to see different churches, and realizing that a good chunk of those people, if they're not seeing a church that's providing good theology with them online, they're just not going to consider looking into it at all. And there's going to be some people that are going to. I have a friend that found Lutheranism on his own, and he's my age, and he's now a member of our church. Praise be to God. But there really isn't any of that. And so, especially my generation, there's really no person that's really kind of jumped on that. And there's so many faithful Christians that are evangelical or Catholic. There's so many different small YouTube channels, Instagram, TikTok channels of people just doing really short Catholic or evangelical content. It's just everywhere. And that's just not nearly enough of that is Lutherans. And so I'd say, so 2 years ago, I decided, well, I'm going to start this podcast of just interviewing different people that are Lutheran. I know a lot of people that are capable of doing that, but they're not going to be willing to go through the internet perspective of starting a podcast or doing daily or weekly content. So even though that I still have no idea how to run podcasting technology, I'm like, well, I'm going to start doing it. And so I got my laptop, my $30 microphone at Walmart, and I started interviewing people that are way smarter than me. And so that's how it all started. I started enjoying it so much, and there was a good chunk in the last 2 years where I was able to do podcasts at least once a week, which was amazing. It was breathtaking how great that was. Definitely how it was encouraging to me. It helped motivate myself not to keep pursuing ministry, but to do stuff like this. And so later down the road, I started getting the confidence of wanting to do more of this myself and wanting to try to actively reach out to people that are my age that aren't Lutheran and just talk about Lutheranism and just show like why we aren't necessarily Protestant, why we're not necessarily Catholic. I mean, we're this special church that's you should look into. And so that's something that I really want to fill the void in, because there's just not nearly enough of that. Because even though we got our all-stars like Wolfmuller and Cooper, I mean, eventually those guys won't be doing that anymore. And so you have all these young people that are inspiring to keep their church going on strong on the internet content. There's not really any of that to do from the Lutherans' perspective. I mean, thankfully we have On the Line podcast that's starting to go viral, which is fantastic. And you guys have Bramwell that's also making a really good podcast. But just someone from my generation to focus on Lutheranism and then also look at different issues from culture and politics, just not be afraid to talk about those things. I made a podcast talking about things like the red pill community and very controversial people like Nick Fuentes or Candace Owens, and I would get really negative comments from people that I know or people that watch my podcast. I'm like, why are you talking about these people? Do you agree with them? Are you starting to go black pilled? What are you doing? I'm like, no, I don't believe in what these people say. I don't agree with them. But these are things that we need to be talking about. There's a big chunk in my generation that are starting to fall into this very ultra conservative category. And if we're not addressing it, these people are going to go down this rabbit hole. It might not be possible to take them out of it. And so you should never, ever be afraid to talk about these issues. I mean, that's like talking to a pastor, you should teach about the law and gospel, but there's some things that you shouldn't talk about that's filled with sin. Just stay away from that. No, a pastor should never be afraid to talk about any sin, talk about any issues or any political issues. I mean, that's his job. And even though that I'm not a called pastor and I'm not, it's not my responsibility to tell people sins in their private, or give people the sacraments or go through these issues from like a pastoral perspective. But still, every Christian should be able to have the knowledge of what Scripture teaches us and how it teaches us to look into these issues and how we should avoid them or battle them and how we can keep our flock out of the clutches of Satan. These are very important issues. And so for a while, this podcast of mine has been kind of growing to be more theological, but then I realized that I also need to be going into the fire. I need to be talking about these things too. And so that's something that I've started doing more of. It's something I want to help inspire more people to do. I don't want to be the only Gen Z guy that's Lutheran and doing a podcast. I hope more people will do that. I constantly am seeing people on Instagram and TikTok that are my age and they're doing shorter content, which is fantastic. I'm also terrible at short content. I can't do 2-minute TikTok videos. I mean, it's just not me. I'm terrible at it. But just seeing that has really encouraged me, and I hope more people continue that. Especially since I'm born into a generation have always known how to use an iPhone, which isn't necessarily a fantastic thing, but we can use those talents to our advantage, and we can help more people see the gospel through social media. I mean, social media is the spawn of the devil, but I mean, we can use anything in the earth to help inspire the law and gospel and help people reach more about the gifts that the Lutheran Church provides. And so that's why I wanted to start the podcast. Not that I know what I'm doing. I probably still don't. There's a possibility of that, but I mean, that's what I want to do. I want to build this podcast, being able to talk about any issue and spread the gospel.
Do you have an opinion, and however you want to go with this, but as to why Lutherans have such a difficult time getting the same kind of traction that the other groups that you mentioned? Why we have trouble getting there?
Yeah, this has been something I've thought about for a really long time, ever since I started the podcast. And so, and yeah, it's helped being more into the fields of advertising Lutheranism from the podcasting perspective. And I noticed how, there's none of that. I talked about it before. There's really no one that's wanting to do it. There are people that I know that are capable of doing it, but they just don't want to be in that nasty area because, the internet's trash. I realize that, and there's a lot of garbage, but it is something that needs to be necessary, especially how the rise of social media is and how it's influencing our generation. And so that's something that we definitely need to be a part of. And so, so I would say just most of it is just numbers. Because I think even though it's not a good thing to have, but to think about, but also I'd say a big reason why people want to be a part of the Catholic Church or be part of the evangelical church because of watching a podcast is because the Catholic Church is really big in numbers, and not only big in numbers in their church itself, but also through the internet. There's probably at least a dozen Catholic podcasts that are over 200,000 followers on YouTube. And like Father Schmidt or Trent Horn, those guys are putting out content all the time. And then you have lots of evangelical Christians that from like 1,000 followers to 1 million followers. That's everywhere too. That's something that's been around for a long time in the past 30 years. And so it's just something that, Lutherans just never really jumped on that train. I remember this last semester, I did a American religion studies class, and they were talking about the colonial time and how different Christians would immigrate to the new America and how colonies were starting to build, and how for a period in time, most of the people that were there were just different denominations that were fighting over who was right. And you have all these new immigrants that were coming, and they're wanting to have a church because at the time it's so important to be a part of a church. And it would always be different people that are battling with each other. The Catholics obviously would be battling with the Baptists or the Anglicans. There was a little chunk of everyone during that time. And so, but what I always laugh at when I would be reading through my study book was not a lot of the Lutherans would be participating in that, which is a big part of that is because most of them were since they were German, they just spoke German. So a lot of them weren't able to communicate with them. So that's a big reason why they stayed away from different people. And so I get that. But I'm also, even though I can speak English, sometimes I don't want to be around other people. So I get it. I want to be with my own people, but, but I'd say it's always been this issue from Lutherans. It's because our theology is so set into scripture. It's just right there. We're not thinking outside of the box. We're not going into philosophy like John Calvin is, how he's always trying to have an explanation for everything and trying to go, and you can get into these rabbit holes. John Calvin was born to be a podcaster. But that's why so many Reformed Christians have such successful podcasts, because 90% of their theology is about looking at this piece of scripture and then just going on a rabbit hole of what they think it means. And then Lutherans, out of everything, the biggest reason why we're not so big in the internet perspective or spreading the gospel to others is like here's the Augsburg Confession. This is what we believe. This is what we believe in scriptures, either in or out. That's what I get from Lutherans in the last few decades. We're very faithful. Nothing's going to destroy us, but when it comes to talking to people outside of it, we've really have adapted this. We've really adapted the feeling of just wanting to be with ourselves, being in our own bubble, and that's something that I'm really trying to stop doing. That's something that I've stopped doing for a long time, but I'm trying to get more people to stop doing it, because when you're just in your bubble, not only you're not wanting to go out and talk to different people about Lutheranism, but also, you're obviously not spreading the gospel to non-believers, and that's the biggest problem. And so I would say that's the biggest issue. We need more people to wanting to go over there, talking about the gospel. I mean, looking at Pastor Bramwell and how he is not afraid to go into the clutches of California and being able to spread the gospel to non-believers, and how people are constantly persecuting his name, and how just looking at him and like saying, guys, if we could see a pastor, an LCMS pastor, do that in California, we most certainly could do this in the Midwest of Missouri or wherever we are. I mean, the Midwest is starting to fall into a lot of sin too. I mean, everywhere is. But if we have these guys that are able to do this in these parts of America, so we could do this in the Midwest. It's not that hard, and we just need to prepare ourselves for it. You don't have to start a podcast. You don't have to constantly be on TikTok. I don't recommend you doing that ever. And so, but these things are important, even though that you don't need to have a podcast for every single Lutheran church or a TikTok or a Instagram. That doesn't have to be necessary, but it is starting to become the dominance of social media is starting to influence people. I mean, that's been the way for such a long time. And in the last 10 years, very interestingly, it's starting to influence people of looking into different churches. And that's something that Lutherans need to get better at. We need to start getting, because we have something that all the other Christian churches don't. We have theology that is purely rooted from what Christ told us. And we don't add anything. We don't take anything out. It's just black and white from what Christ taught. And that's something that we need to address more. And so that's what I'm inspiring more people to be, because not enough people do it.
Wow, that's a really great answer. So I have what do you think of training, like social media training at the seminaries or something along those lines?
I've never really thought about that. Last time I talked to Pastor Bramwell, for such a long time, he has experience with the radio. I mean, he was part of KFUO radio for a long time, and so he has had that training. And so, that would be something that would be interesting to do, because obviously, I don't think our president or leaders in the LCMS want to encourage our pastors to be constantly on the internet. We want them to be focused at their churches. I mean, there could be a chance that I wouldn't be able to be on podcasts constantly, because if I'm running a church, I need to be worried about things that are more important. But I do agree with you. There should be somewhat encouragement of doing these things. I remember talking to Pastor Fisk a couple of years ago, and he thought that there should be an encouragement that, like, in the seminaries, you should like start like an actual podcast and use that as a way to train pastors. Because what I've experienced in the last 2 years of being on a podcast, I've been able to learn so much from people that are so smarter than me, such wise Lutheran scholars and pastors. That's helped me so much. And then secondly, it's helped me with speaking, communicating, planning, all these really good things that pastors need to be really good about doing. I mean, when they're running a church. And so I would say something that the St. Louis Seminary is doing right now. They have a podcast I think it's called Under the Fig Tree. That's pretty cool. They don't do it every week, but I think it'd be really, really cool if they had pastors running it, or guys that are constantly on it, that are training in seminary. That'd be really cool. I wouldn't really know like how you'd be able to like make training courses like that. I'm definitely not the person to ask for that, but that'd be definitely something to consider, because I think even though we have a lot of different Lutheran radio shows that's still been going on for a really long time, we either need to modernize those a bit, or we probably just need to erase that altogether and just embrace more modern shows that are more appealing and more efficient when it comes to it. Because a lot of those shows, they don't even have video podcasts, and I mean that's such a big deal right now, video podcasts. And so yeah, so I mean that's another thing too, being able to talk to someone in person, face to face. I mean, that's another big thing too. I mean, it's a lot easier to talk on the radio because no one can see you, but I mean, video podcasts are such a big deal. I mean, yeah. So I wouldn't really be too sure how to do that. But I mean, that's a great question. That reminded me of guys that I've talked to that have addressed that. I think that'd be pretty interesting.
So yeah, because I mean, one thing Pastor Wolfmiller, you always talk about him, but like he tries and experiments on so many things. I think even for any regular. He has this Sunday drive to church and Sunday drive home. Like the Sunday drive to church is like the, you know, the readings and like the theme of the day and stuff. And I like just that for every. I could see that any congregation would love to have that. Like you just go, oh, well, let's listen to something on the way to church, and like just get a prep for what's coming up, and you know what hymns we're going to be singing, and that kind of thing. And so his experimentation and stuff like that, you know, with the medium has always been you know, inspiring. And so that's why I thought of this idea. Just as a aside, my daughter just moved to Fort Wayne. She just got married, and her husband's a professor of computer science at Purdue Fort Wayne. But we actually own a home in St. Louis that we rent to a seminarian. And my idea is that can see myself retiring back to Fort Wayne, and this idea of you know, doing social media training, or you know, like new media training to seminarians is just kind of come to mind. And I run it by people occasionally and just see what they think, you know, whether it might be useful or not. And so that might be my retirement, is what I'm kind of hoping.
Well, man, that's a great idea. Oh man, I'd be on board with that. That'd be fantastic. Yeah. And definitely, since that's a good move going to Fort Wayne, because I have a feeling it'd be a lot bit easier to encourage that in Fort Wayne than in St. Louis. But I mean that's such a great idea. Yeah,
they have plenty of space, and so yeah, I just you know, I know a couple of professors there. One pastor, or Dr. Peppercorn, he used to be in Sacramento, which is like, you know, 90 minutes away from where I am. So I know him pretty well. So I have a couple more young person kind of questions. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but like you've talked about posting, you know, like finding a spouse or finding a date even. Like what kind of challenges are we as older people missing that, you know, like whether we can help you or not, but what are we missing about that whole context?
Yeah. As for my ex posts, that just depends on how grumpy I am. That's all it depends on. But yeah, from like the dating perspective, I was thinking about this today, because I knew I was going to come on your show, and you said you were going to address that. And so just kind of the different things that I look at from my point of view, from what a lot of different older generations just don't get. And I mean this in the most respectful way, but I mean, when you look at a lot of issues that my generation has to go through, I mean, the face of all the things that are going on, I mean, are just telling us that we shouldn't start relationships and we shouldn't start marriage. And I think about people that, you know, they go to me and they're like, hey, you got a girlfriend yet? Or people that are pressing me like that. I mean, the stereotype of like, why aren't you finding someone yet? And so, it gets old. I mean, because there's so many people that are in my shoes that are facing modern day problems that I just not only make it very difficult, but just basically just want us to give up. Which, I mean, I'm not saying you should give up. I'm not giving up. I'm not one of those people online that are saying you should just be your own man, just be an individual, be prideful with yourself, and just live out that life. I'm not saying that, but I do understand why people are wanting to go that, because that seems way more appealing. Because right now we're living in a time where our economy is in shambles right now. It's very expensive to go to college, to work a job. Minimum wage jobs are very hard. I mean, that's what most of my generation is doing right now, and it's very expensive to own anything. It's very hard to start relationships right now. My generation is the first ever people to grow up with social media or the iPhone. And so we're living in a generation where women are being free to do whatever they want. So many over sexualized things, very evil things. I mean, for a long time, I thought it was men that had it harder in the dating world, but I'm starting to feel like it's more harder for women, because now we live in a society where the left are telling young men that you're terrible. You should just sit down, be a good little boy, and just not do anything, and just be a feminist. And I feel like our generation, or men my age, are just sick of that, and we're not jumping into that boat anymore, which is great. And that's why I think women are having it more difficult, because they're living in a sinful society that's encouraging them to do these sinful things. It's a pendulum switch from like a conservative era in America, where we're having conservative values from the nuclear family and starting marriage and having families, completely switch. It's terrible. We're living in hookup culture. We're living in cultures where women should just sleep around, and that's okay. We should normalize it. It's fine. Family, the idea of starting a family is just demonized, which is terrible. And so, I mean, that's a big reason why there's most of my generation aren't even dating or even pursuing relationships right now, because it's just gotten so bad. And that's just from like that's just like statistics from just the secular world and just my generation overall. I mean, think how hard that is for the Christian man and just trying to find a Christian woman. I mean, there's a lot of good Christian girls out there, but the problem is something that I've realized is that even though there's a lot of good Christian girls that are conservative and good, they still fall into a lot of categories of feminism, because naturally a lot of women my age, they don't really want to pursue having families or getting married young. They want to focus on their careers, and which is fine and good. I mean, if you're someone that's that wanting to pursue a career, I mean, good for you. I mean, I'm not discouraging that, but at the same time, all these girls, they're doing this because a lot of them think that they shouldn't start a family because it looks negative. I mean, just being in a household, being a mom, submitting to a husband, I mean, all those things just seem really bad. And so that's something else that needs to start flipping around. You should be happy to become a mother. It's such a blessing to be a mother. And so that's something that it's definitely a big struggle for dating. That's definitely difficult. I mean, for me, because I don't want to be in constant theology battles with my wife or with my girlfriend. I want to find someone that's a confessional Lutheran. And I think, and just to make it even worse, I think there's even more girls that claim to be Lutheran, and I would just disagree with them. I mean, like, I don't think you're a confessional Lutheran. I think you're a faithful Christian, but not a confessional Lutheran. And so, I mean, it is a tough pill to swallow, because that's also a lot of problems with a lot of Christian men out there as well. And yeah, and the biggest temptation I see from friends that I know, and they're doing this right now, is that they're starting long-term relationships with girls that are Christian but are not Lutheran, and that's not good. That you should never put yourself in that situation. It's very tempting to do it, but you shouldn't do it. And I have a friend that's been in a relationship for quite a while, and I'm talking to him and I'm saying, what are your long-term plans? And he's saying, yeah, I think we're gonna get married, but the problem is I really want to be Lutheran. And then I'm asking him, like, why are you putting yourself in that situation? Why would you even be dating her in the first place? I mean, I welcome people to date girls and talk about theology, look at differences. I've known people that weren't Lutheran, found a spouse that was, and then eventually got married to them and became Lutheran. That's always possible, but most of the time that's not going to happen. And if you do that second date, the third date, fourth date, eventually become boyfriend and girlfriend, and you're still going to different churches, I mean, you're going down this slippery slope where you're like, well, I know I'm a confessional Lutheran, but I really want to have kids before I'm 25, so I'm just going to do it. And so, they're making those conversations, and they're like, yeah, I still believe in what Lutherans teach. But I mean, it's really, to be honest with you, I mean, it's pretty sad what you've come to. And so, I mean, it's just from layer to layer to layer how difficult things are. Man, I'm being so negative about this, but I mean, that's the truth. I mean, both genders are being polar opposites right now. And then on top of that, it's being very hard in the Christian perspective, because Christian girls don't want to pursue work rather than motherhood. And then on top of that, Lutheran guys are in this really tough corner, because so many families in the last 20, 30 years that are Lutheran weren't taking their Lutheran family households as seriously enough. I mean, and that's showing, because there's a reason why 3 out of 4 confirmed Lutheran high schoolers from the past 10 years aren't Lutheran anymore, because it was in the household that you weren't preparing your child for what's to come. So they could be a confessional Lutheran and eventually start a confessional Lutheran household. That's a big problem. And that goes back to just Lutherans not being Lutheran, just going into the category of people like Catholics saying that, oh yeah, I identify as Catholic, but I mean, they're not Catholic. They just say they are because that's their family's always been Catholic, but they only go to church a few times a year, and they don't take the Eucharist enough, and they don't go to confession. I mean, that's a big problem with a lot of Lutherans too. They either go to church every other week, they don't take it very seriously, and they want their kids to experience different things just for the sake of experiencing. I mean, that's a big problem why there's so many people that it's just everywhere that no one wants to date. So it's definitely, I think it's going to be tough. I think there's going to be, in the next 10 or 15 years, there's going to be a big shortage of Lutheran families, and I hope I'm wrong. I there could be a possibility that could be the total opposite, and just the Lutheran Church starts flourishing with new children and new families, in which I think that'd be fantastic. But I really do think this is kind of a point where a lot of faithful Lutherans are realizing that we've been so used to being in our little box that we're missing out on so much of the bigger picture of spreading the gospel to non-believers, taking care of our other brothers and sisters and helping them understand better rooted theology, and then also just looking at inside of our own box and see if it's intact as well. And I mean, it's these different things that make healthy families and communities and churches. And so that's definitely going to be the start to find your spouse. I mean, I live in the Lutheran Missouri. I live in Missouri, and I'm part of the Lutheran Missouri Synod, and there really isn't any Lutheran girls out there. And I mean, I feel bad for the one dude that's my age, and he lives all the way up in who knows where, Missouri, out of nowhere, and there's only 20 80-year-olds at their church, and he can't find a wife. And so he's stuck to this decision, well, am I going to have to wait a really long time, or am I going to have to try to convert someone? And I mean, if God is going to want me to convert my future wife, so be it. But I really hate the thought of just automatically thinking, okay, well, since there's no Lutheran women, I'm just going to have to convert or die alone. And I don't really like to think it that way, especially since everything is God's will and he's in control of everything. But yeah, so not to be a negative Nancy about it, but it's just been a whirlwind in the last like 5 years, just seeing how the dating and relationships have just crumbled, and how that's also affecting Christian relationships, and how it's definitely affecting the Lutheran side of it. I mean, it's not just like one simple key of like why it's not going on. It's just different layers. I mean, on top of that, I'm conservative, I'm a Christian, I'm a Lutheran, and that's going to be especially difficult. And obviously it's going to take a lot of soul searching to find somebody. But sometimes that happens in society in different periods of time. You get to a point where you forget your old ways that worked, and then you get lazy and you fall away, and things turn out bad. And so you need to start rebuilding yourself again. And I think that's definitely a point of, even though we technically have 1.8 million people in our synod, I really do think there's probably not even 1 million people that are good, faithful, confessional Lutherans. I think that number is very deceiving. And so I think there's needs to be a time where Lutherans of all ages just need to realize that we need to renovate ourselves, not only from us individually as a church or a circuit or wherever we are, but I mean, just as a society of Lutherans. I mean, we need to get back at it. I mean, I really didn't like when the LCMS turned off their X account because they just wanted to focus on Facebook and X. And I think their main excuse was they didn't like all the garbage on X. I mean, there's garbage on Facebook and Instagram too, but you still want to use that. I mean, that's not a good excuse. I'll run their X account. I'll post articles. I'll post content. I'll do whatever you want. I've made it clear that I would do that. I would be a part of that. Use that 23,000 follower account to help young men that are actively using X to see Lutheranism, the LCMS, and make it clear that we're not the ELCA. But turning that off is helping the case of Lutherans falling into the category of people that are tormenting the Lutheran name. And I mean, getting back to the dating side of it, I mean, just a lot of issues that we haven't really looked at or thought of that it was important to do, and it's just kind of bit us in the butt. And so, I mean, it's a leader perspective, it's a pastor side perspective, it's a church community perspective, and it's also just you as an individual realizing that there's things that you need to change and help grow. And so Gen Z is a good flourishing Christian generation, which is great, but it's going to be still very difficult to find solid relationships. And that's going to be something that we're going to have to work on. It's going to be a tough 10 or 15 years, but I hope if we have these few men that I know very well that are starting to rise up and see that, I think we could have a really good few generations in the future. It's just a growing process. I mean, it's all in God's time. He knows when everything's into fruition, but it's going to be a process. But I mean that's why I'm doing this podcast. That's why I'm trying to reach out to more people. That's why I'm trying to help the Lutheran church grow. And that would be so good. I hope more Lutherans make more Lutherans. That'd be my last message.
You know what? I think that's a great way to end this, because that is a really good message to put out there. Ray, do you have anything you want to plug or push your podcast or anything like that, where people can go get your podcast?
Yeah, well, not really, besides I just started my new website. It's lhcpodcast.com. You can check that out. See all the different articles I'm posting. If you want to help support, I really much appreciate it. Or just check out me on Spotify and YouTube and Apple Podcast. I really appreciate you having me on. It's been a great blessing. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Ray. I'll talk to you soon.